Good evening and welcome to Crime Beat. I'm Anthony Robart. Tonight, it began as a house fire that quickly turned into a mystery so big it sounded like a plot in a movie. But for the family who lived it and the investigators who tried to solve it, the story is far too real.
When they rolled up, it was a fully engulfed fire in the garage.
She said there was a fire last night at Carm's house. And she told me that they found a body in the garage. She's missing.
Could have been a random guy that broke into the house. It could have been a bunch of other things.
He might not have gotten his hands dirty, but he did it.
If your wife is found to be murdered in your house, do you contact a criminal lawyer or don't you?
Here now is part one of Nothing Is What It Seems.
Do you require police, fire, ambulance?
Hello, there's a fire on Pebblestone Crescent.
Okay, where do you see the fire?
In the garage.
So it's the garage with these flames visible? What's your emergency?
Have you guys gotten a call of the fire on Pebblestone Crescent?
Yes, I have. Can you tell me the exact address? Fire service?
I just want to report a fire
Where
in
is
my
it?
neighborhood. It's either 1164 Pebblestone Crescent in Pickering.
Pebblestone?
Yeah. The fire-
Okay, yep, we're on scene.
We were the third truck that arrived that evening. The visibility obviously was zero. You couldn't see anything because of the heavy smoke and fire conditions. We had to exercise a lot of caution. One garage door was missing, and then the next step for us was to take the second door apart. We wanted to make sure that we got the maximum amount of ventilation into the garage so we could clear the smoke out as quickly as possible. That's when we started to make a little bit more of an aggressive entry into the garage. We discovered that in the center there was a rather large liquid fire. At that point, we actually switched and went and got a large dry chemical extinguisher. The visibility was still, of course, quite low, and as we moved into the garage, that's when firefighter Grubich, who was in front of me, tripped over something. We had to get very down, right onto our hands and knees to get very close. That's when we determined that there actually was somebody in the garage. She was probably 8 feet or so into the garage, so we did not see her until we actually came right upon her.
It was 15th of September 2014, and I was working afternoon shift with my partner, Detective MacArthur. The sergeant from the front desk came down and said there's a house fire with a fatality. It's a nice neighborhood. It's a residential neighborhood, 2-story homes. I got out of the car, walked up. The platoon chief said when they rolled up, it was a fully engulfed fire in the garage. They started with water suppression at that point, but they could smell accelerants, and they had found a body.
We realized somewhat later on that finding somebody in a garage was rather odd. It's not where we would typically look for somebody. Generally speaking, you're awake, you're alert when you're in your garage, you're working on something, so it's even if something happens, it's usually within your power to get out. That certainly had us scratching our heads.
Especially in a garage, you have 2 points of egress. You have the back and then you have your front door. So why is this person deceased in a fire? Was it medical? Was there an accident? They said they cleared the house. They said they found a purse and set of keys in the kitchen and clothing laid out on the bed, but there was nobody else in the house. So I spoke with the patrol sergeant to make sure that we had pictures being taken, make sure we grabbed plates of the cars in the area on the street. I had him start to canvass for video, see if there's any people that have cameras that look out onto the street all around the area. I knew at that point we had the scene secure. We're not going to really do too much until the next morning. I knew the fire marshal was coming out because it is a fire with a death.
So when I arrive on scene, the street, it's got ambulance, police cars, fire trucks, hoses spread across the road, neighbors, there's lights. It's not chaos, but it's a lot going on and nothing going on at the same time because the fire is out, so there's a lot of standing around waiting for me, really. I'm taking it all in because at some point I have to literally sift through the scene, but also sift through all the information that's come my way and see how it fits or doesn't fit. Inside the garage, the contents had been completely consumed. It was gutted. The deceased was located more to the back of the garage and to the right-hand side if you were facing it. The left-hand side of the garage had a trailer with motor, like dirt bikes on it, and there were bicycles and kids' sports toys, golf clubs, as well as gardening tools like shovels and rakes up against the wall. The right-hand side was clear. For the most part, you could pull a car in, but it wasn't until we removed the safety blanket that you get from the paramedics that I realized that there was a bicycle on top of the leg of the deceased as well as the table saw on top of the bicycle, and I thought it odd. As we were removing the deceased, I noticed a strong odor of gasoline. And one of the persons who was helping stepped on something that sounded crunchy. And we just briefly lifted it up and I could see that it was the protected portion of a gasoline container. But it is a garage. There were motorbikes in there. People do have gasoline in their garages, so it's not out of place, but it is, again, just something that I put in my back of my mind not to forget about.
As fire investigators sorted through the debris, trying to piece together what happened, police were trying to track down the residents.
When my partner called me, he just said the homeowner is on his way to the station with his sons. The homeowner was David Knight, his wife, Carmela, but we didn't know where she was at that point. We got information as we're talking that the family of Carmela was showing up in the front lobby of the station. So when I walked into the room with the family, they were all very, very upset. They couldn't get a hold of Carm. They were trying on her cell phone. They were texting her. They were calling friends. And these are family and friends that have shown up at the station because they're so concerned.
As Detective Kent tried to keep them calm, David Knight arrived.
He was told that there had been a fire at his residence.
We found a body inside.
And he had told them that him and his two boys had attended a hockey game in Toronto and that they were on their way back from the arena when he received the phone call to come to the station. He didn't believe that it was Carm in the garage.
It may be her, your ex-wife. What's her first name? Carmela. So it could be Carmela. No.
In fact, he said it's not Carm. And he, at that point, told the investigating officer that him and Carmela had recently separated.
Fairly amicable, going back and forth through the lawyers.
He didn't want to believe that it was Carm in the garage, and he was worried about his boys.
Boys.
He appeared to be upset. At one point, he put his hands into his face and said, "It's not her, it's not her."
Yeah, we're going to take this minute by minute, hour by hour, okay?
After the interview with David, we kind of put him out a back door because the information we were getting from the family was there's a big problem here. They believe he's involved in the death of his wife. They're making allegations that there's quite a bit of strife going on between David and Carmela, that they were looking to get divorced. There was money issues. They believed he killed her, and it was going on and on. While we're talking, well, they were positive. That's Carmela in the fire. And I said, we don't know. The fire has consumed so much that we don't know. So I said, although we might believe it, we have two investigations going here. We have a fire death investigation, and we have a missing person that we can't get a hold of. Now, they may come together, but we'll kind of go from there. I had said to them, you know, hope for the best, but we need to prepare for the worst.
Fire investigators scoured the garage looking for answers.
I'm looking at the fire patterns, I'm looking at the fuel loads that are present, anything that can be ignited and burn. I'm looking at fire spread, I'm looking at what's left, what's not left. You know, was there drywall, wasn't there drywall? I'd found a cell phone, or what was left of it. I don't know whose it was, but it's given to the police. Is there evidence of an explosion because there's gasoline involved? I didn't know at what point or when gasoline became involved, because if there's a fire proceeding elsewhere and it melts the containers, then of course you're going to get gasoline to spread and pour. Or was gasoline poured before the fire and ignited? Because it's not gasoline liquid that gets ignited, it's actually the vapors. The ignition source could be anything. It could be a light switch. I did have an engineer examine the electrical components in the garage because the garage was energized at the time of the fire. He was able to eliminate any failures or faults, being an arc or a spark that would have ignited the gasoline vapors. There were 2 gasoline containers. One was melted from top down and the base was remaining, and one was on its side. And again, it had been melted top down, but the side remained. And they were clearly identifiable, bright red gasoline containers, and they were located directly beside where the deceased had been laying. It was reported that the deceased was a smoker, so I considered accidental ignition of combustible materials, being that a garbage can, or sometimes people leave too many cigarette butts in their butt can and they ignite. So I considered alternate ignition sources. I also considered alternate areas of origin. I considered it where the cigarettes were found. I considered it at the front of the garage. I considered it at the other side of the garage, at the back of the garage. I don't know how much gasoline was in those containers to begin with. I do know there was gasoline on top of and underneath the deceased. The remainder of their clothing was saturated with gasoline. What I can say is that gasoline was distributed and ignited with an open flame.
It was a significant finding, but it didn't explain exactly what happened.
We're still in that infancy to the investigation where we don't even know what we have. We don't even know if it's a homicide, just an accident, a medical incident, an accident with a medical incident. We don't know anything.
Welcome back. After a woman is found dead in a garage fire, investigators try to determine who she is and how she came to be there. But one thing is clear, this was no accident. We now return to nothing is what it seems. Tara Cochimilio met Carmela Knight in university and was one of a group of 5 tight-knit girlfriends. She'll never forget hearing about the fire.
It was the next day. I was at work and my phone rang. And it was Kathy. And I was really excited to see her name on my phone because, you know, everybody's working, busy. It's not that often you pick up the phone and call somebody. It's a text to check in. Right away, her voice, she could barely speak. And she said, there was a fire last night at Carm's house. And I was in shock. I said, are the boys okay? Is everybody okay? And she said, the boys are fine, they weren't home. And I said, what about Carm? And she said, no one's seen her. And I just kind of crawled down on the ground and screamed. And then she told me that they found a body in the garage and that they hadn't identified who it was, but she's missing. So I thought in my head I could try to hold on to some hope, but where could she be?
Ah, there it
There's
is.
the door.
There's the thing from the door.
That morning, as the post-mortem began, homicide detectives Diane Jennings and John Taylor got up to speed in case everyone's worst fears turned out to be true.
What we were told was that her body was badly charred and that when they started to conduct the autopsy, the pathologist located a tourniquet around her arm as well as a syringe within her body.
The syringe and the tourniquet around the arm obviously played a completely different role in how we were looking at this. There were so many different things going on at that time. Accident, suicide, did someone light this fire on purpose? We had the drug use at the same time as the fire, so we really didn't know what we had the first day.
That evening, they received the autopsy report, except for the toxicology results, which were pending.
Hey, take a look at this.
What they learned erased all doubt.
The pathologist explained that there was no soot in her throat, which means that she was dead at the time of the fire. She also advised that there was blunt force trauma and also a neck compression. So she had determined and classified it as a homicide.
They told me that they didn't know if it was her or not, but I knew it was her. Her car wouldn't be in the driveway. She was nowhere to be found. We kept calling her, and there was no answer. So I knew that he had done something.
The next day, dental records confirmed it was Carmela.
She wouldn't have been missing for days, letting us wonder where she was. So that wasn't really a surprise. I just can't believe that this amazing person who would never harm another individual, no matter who it was, and would only help everybody, give you the shirt off her back kind of person, that somebody would want them dead, that somebody would intentionally kill them. These years later, I still can't wrap my head around how anybody would want to cause her harm. It doesn't make any sense.
When they told me, I said to the officer, he might not have gotten his hands dirty, but he did it. So I don't care what you find. I don't care what you tell me. I know it was him.
David was staying now with his father at an apartment in Ajax, and we were talking at one point with the father saying, listen, we need to talk to David again. And he was saying, David's not going to talk to you, he's got a lawyer. And then David pulled in with the boys, and the boys were directed to go right into the apartment. And my partner tried to talk to him, and David just put up his hand, no, I'm not talking to you, and he left.
Detectives remained in the parking lot in their vehicle. And a short time later, David Knight's father came and handed them a business card saying that all communication from here on in should come through David's lawyer. I thought it was odd. I mean, it is his right, but I would have thought that if there was a fire and there was a body in the garage, that you would want to know all of the answers, like what happened.
There's two ways to look at it, right? If your wife is found to be murdered in your house, do you contact a criminal lawyer or don't you? Many of the guys in homicide say, I would just go and get a criminal lawyer right away and not talk to the police. Maybe half of us said, no, I would talk to the police. Something was going on, obviously, but we knew David was at the hockey arena. We knew pretty well immediately that he was not near the scene, so that was another huge problem for us.
So we had a team of investigators interviewing hockey parents and hockey coaches, trying to learn his movements and what occurred that night, because he did in fact say he was at the rink the entire time. We also had surveillance on David.
Yeah, you look at the husband, you look at the significant other, whoever that is, but it could have been a random guy that broke into the house. It could have been a bunch of other things. We've had homicides in the past that it's been ex-girlfriends, ex-boyfriends, other people that they know.
I was informed from the interview with Franca on the night of the fire about this man in a black SUV that had come to the house. It scared Carm, and this man was looking for David. So we wanted to learn more about who this person was and why was he looking for David.
Welcome back to Crime Beat. Carmela Knight's family feels certain her husband David had something to do with her death, but he's got an alibi. Now, as police look into the couple's relationship, they are also on the hunt for the mysterious man who came to the house days before she died. We now return to nothing is what it seems.
There was 5 of us that became really close. We all lived at residence at university in our first year. We would be at pub nights together, we would be studying together, walking around campus, doing all the fun things that first-year university students should be doing. After university, we stayed very, very close. When we all started getting married, we were in each other's bridal parties, at each other's weddings, the birth of our children. Carm was an amazing friend that was always there for you when you needed her. If something was wrong, she'd be there to listen.
No matter what she was going through, always had a smile on her face. Like, I didn't know that she was going through what she was going through for almost 2 years. She always came in with a big smile and a laugh, you know.
Where do you think that came from?
Her dad. Her dad was very, always happy, never judged anyone. And she was the same, never judged anybody, you know. Everybody was a good person.
Carm met Dave at a nightclub. I wasn't there. She called me the next day and told me that she met someone and she really liked him, and he sent her flowers after they met. When I met Dave, I was happy that Carm was happy.
I never liked him. From the day I met him, I never liked him. And I remember Carm not talking to me for quite a while because I wouldn't allow him in the house. She's making excuses. He's just quiet, Mom, you know, he doesn't like to talk. I said, I don't want a full conversation, but if he's entering my home, I expect him at least to say hello. So that was a problem. When he actually asked her to marry him, I wasn't thrilled, but she loved him, she said, right? And she wanted to be with him, so it was either lose my daughter or accept him. Even when she was little, like, you know, when she started babysitting, I knew she was going to be a good mother because she just loved kids, loved being around kids.
Carm was an amazing mother. She would light up talking about those kids. She would have done anything for them. And she was a hockey mom. So she was always at the arena, always taking her kids to where they needed to be, and never complained about it. Never was like, oh, I gotta go here, I gotta go there. It was excitement, it was joy about being with them and about watching them do what they love to do.
But not everything was as it seemed.
She never opened up about her problems to me, no, never. Like I said, she was always, everything's good, everything's happy, everything's fine.
But a mother knows.
Well, you know what? I didn't really. I didn't know.
Did you have a sense?
No, none at all. Like I said, she hid it really, really good. Even when they were seeing a therapist, she would say, okay, Mom, can you look after the kids? Dave and I are having some issues about traveling. He's traveling too much. And I would ask her all the time, you know, I would say, why is he traveling so much? You know, he's never here for the kids. You can't do this on your own now that you're working and stuff. Oh, she goes, Mom, don't worry about it. We're fine. We're fine. She never complained. Never.
Carmela and David were going through a separation, but it wasn't amicable. And in fact, David had a mistress.
She said, are you sitting down? I said, yeah. She says, yeah, Mom. He's been having an affair since 2012. I found a USB. And I said, who is this person? Do you know? And she says, no, she's in Florida. And she told me, she says, I'm going to leave him, but I want to talk to him first. I want to see if we can, you know, fix this. She says, I don't want to be the blame of having the family split up for the kids, you know.
At some point, it was clear David had no intention of ending the affair. Carmela filed for divorce.
She filed end of June. And then everything just started happening, you know. He got into her email, knew exactly what was going on, like what she was saying to the lawyer. We used to have this house in Florida and we rented it, and he told the people in Florida that they were not to talk to Carm or myself anymore. And Carm was the one who did all the rentals and everything, right? And they wouldn't talk to us. He had signed the house over to his brother. I gave him $120,000 to purchase the home.
Besides the extramarital affair, did you have any sense, any history of violence between the two?
Never. I never saw him raise his voice to her. Never saw him lay a hand on her. No, there was never any of that. Mentally, yes. When they separated, she slept in her room and he slept in the spare room. And he would have the boys in there with him. And he would open the door to her bedroom and call her names. You know, you're disgusting and whatever else he would call her, right?
At the end of August, when David took the boys on vacation to Florida, Carmela tried to move out of the family home.
She wanted to move in with her mother in preparation for the upcoming school year for the boys. And she had moved a number of items to her mother's house and was advised by her lawyer that she should return those items. In the course of our investigation, we were able to locate a video that Carmela had taken of the house. She didn't want to be accused of damaging anything or didn't want to be accused of not returning anything.
Just making sure that everything is here. This is their bikes, scooters.
And it was after that, that on the 29th of August, she called the police to report that David had smashed a table.
That is the table, hallway table upstairs that Dave smashed and broke.
And the police attended and took a report. And then we also learned that David had also filed a police report on the 30th of August indicating that Carmela had stolen his computer.
All of this prompted Carmela to file a motion with family court, little knowing she would never make it.
Carmela had filed an emergency motion for an order of exclusive possession of the home and for custody of the children. And that hearing was to occur that Thursday. Fire being on the Monday, this hearing was to occur on the Thursday.
While the detectives were uncovering all of this, they also investigated the story of the man in the black SUV.
2 guys showed up at the house.
Franca informed the detectives in her interview about this incident that had happened at the house a couple of days prior, where this man had come to the residence and Carmela was in the backyard.
The guy peeked over the fence and said, "Is Dave here?" And she said, "No, he's not. Who are you?"
And Carmela didn't know who this gentleman was and just basically told her that he was owed money.
Apparently Dave had stolen money from them. $250,000, $200,000, something like that.
At the beginning of the investigation, what is this? Where did this come from? And who are these people coming to search for Dave? Because they were looking for him. So did they do something to hurt Carmela and hurt Dave, through Carmela? We had no idea.
David and him had purchased a company in Florida called Southern Gulf, and there was 3 gentlemen involved in the purchase of this company, and they decided to not move ahead, but some of the money had been put in trust in Florida, and somehow David Knight was able to get that money that was in trust. Officers interviewed him and concluded that he had nothing to do with the murder or the fire, and that he simply was there to retrieve the money that he was owed.
It wasn't David's only business venture.
He had just purchased a company called S.A. Casey in Florida, and it was a construction company. His ultimate plan was to move to Florida, to run this company, and that's where he wanted to eventually live with the boys. And that Carmela didn't want to move. She didn't want to leave her mom and her sister and her family and friends.
Still, none of this put David at the scene the night Carmela died. He was at the hockey rink, according to witnesses and surveillance video.
We had teams out interviewing the hockey coaches, retrieving the video from the rink, and talking with some of the other hockey parents that were present that night. What we learned was David had arrived early to practice. The surveillance video showed him coming in through the side door and going into the change room and getting changed and whatnot. And him and his boys were observed just in the hallways getting ready for practice. Hockey practice was from 6:30 till 8 p.m. And we learned through the hockey coaches that David was on the ice as a coach. And we learned that he was on his telephone on the last half of the practice. We also learned from some of the hockey parents that he was in fact on the ice the entire time.
Welcome back. The investigation into Carmela Knight's murder picks up steam when David's sister-in-law calls police. We now return to Nothing Is What It Seems.
I did hockey camp. I helped all week.
During his interview the night of the fire, David had given police a rundown of what he'd done that day.
He said that he went to the dump. I think he said he went to a gas station and cleaned a car. He went to a hardware store on Brock Road. Then he was kind of vague, said he came home kind of in the middle of the day, did a few things. You know, kids came home from school, had to get them ready for hockey, got their hockey equipment, then we're gone. First couple days, our investigative team went out everywhere from house, Herb Carnegie Arena, everywhere that David said he went, seized every piece of video that we could seize. It's like it's thousands of hours of video that we seized.
Because David had lawyered up, detectives put a surveillance team on him. 3 days after the fire, he was spotted at his parents' condo.
On that first day, we had our surveillance team taking David with a gray-haired lady, so we didn't know who she was at the time, but she went into the bank. Dave did not go into the bank, did the transaction, whatever she was doing in there, and came back out. We had no idea who she was.
And then he made his way to 42 Cameron. He exited the vehicle, went into the residence. Shortly thereafter, a younger fellow with blonde hair was seen getting into a white Kia and made its way to Moody's Motel and picked up another individual, and then they were let run and they returned back to surveilling David Knight. At that point, we did not know who those people were.
At the same time, they conducted a search of the Knight home.
One of the officers noted that there was a security system on the wall, and he suggested that maybe perhaps we could obtain the records from the alarm company, which in fact we did.
Then came a phone call that would change everything.
I received a phone call from Diane on the Friday saying that we had to go do an interview on the Saturday with Heather Knight.
David's sister-in-law, married to his brother Matt, who was helping him set up a company in Florida. He was also the driver of the white Kia.
My name's Diane Jennings. I'm a detective with Durham Racial Police. And could you just state your name? I'm Heather Knight. I'm going to let you begin where you would like.
She was very cooperative. She had a lot of information to provide.
He started talking about this move to Florida. His brother wanted to move to Florida and get him to run businesses down there. All of a sudden, you know, he's picking up and going to Florida. Like Dave's like, I need you here this weekend. I need you here now. You've got to start working immediately.
Matthew had been in Florida since May of that year, helping to get the company off the ground and setting up offices and whatnot.
There's this guy, Graham, and I don't know if you guys are aware of him or of anything like that as of yet. He's a guy that Matt's known for years. He worked with Matt at Hot Sets. Him and Graham's a bit of a drifter, had a bit of a shady past, but he's truthfully a sweet, good-hearted, nice guy.
Graham McDonald had been hired by David Knight to do renovations around the home on Pebblestone to get it ready for sale.
David called me at work and he said, I have a really big favor to ask. Would it be okay if Graham stayed at your house for 2 or 3 weeks while he does some work for me at my house?
On September 10th, David tells her to put Graham up in a nearby motel because Matt's coming home. Excited to see her husband, she calls the motel, but they're full.
I finally find him a hotel room in Whitby. I drive him out to Whitby. I pay for the hotel room, check him in, drive him back to the Bear and the Firkin. I give him $40 out of my pocket to say, here's a couple bucks to go have a couple beers till Dave picks you up. I said, well, nothing personal, Graham. I said, but Matt's going to be home in a couple hours. I haven't seen him in 2 months. I said, I got to clean the house.
And she learned that he didn't come directly home, but in fact he went to the Bear and the Firkin in Pickering with David and met up with Graham, which she thought was odd that he didn't come straight home, having been away since May. On the night of the fire, she received a phone call from Dorian, who is Matthew and David's mother.
And I knew something was wrong by her voice.
Indicating that there's been a fire at David's house and that there was a body found in the garage. Matthew immediately gets up off the couch and leaves.
And then Dave called the house. Matt had been gone for a bit, and I assumed that he came to the police station to see his brother. And Dave called and said, "Where's Matt?" And I said, "What do you mean? I thought he was with you." And I'm like, kind of like, well, where the hell did he go if he didn't go to the police station and stuff? And then when he came home, he goes, "Just between me and you," he goes, "I went to see Graham." Because he goes, I just thought that his whereabouts that day were kind of strange, because Monday morning, he showed up around 11 o'clock in the morning to grab his knapsack.
Graham had popped by the house to pick up his backpack, and he indicated that he was going to Toronto to be with his grandmother, that his grandmother wasn't doing well.
About 4 o'clock, 4:30 in the afternoon, I sent Graham a text.
She checked in with Graham MacDonald on the text, asking how things went with his grandmother, and she didn't receive a response until sometime later on that evening.
Which I thought was weird, because he's always got his phone with him 24/7. He's on it constantly.
So as far as she was concerned, Graham had been in Toronto that entire time.
And then I heard back from him about 8:30, 8:45, something that night. Went to my grandma's. She wasn't there. Not sure she went to the doctor's or something. Feeling really uneasy right now or something.
Do you still have these texts?
Yeah,
Okay. All right.
Then she dropped a bombshell.
She also told us that Matthew unexpectedly left on what she called the red-eye flight on the early hours of the Thursday morning.
And said that he had met some really scary people over the last couple of days.
What did he tell you?
He didn't tell me a whole lot more than that. He just said, "I know who, what, when, where, and how. With a phone call, I could have stopped this, and I have to live with it for the rest of my life." And he burst into tears and whatever else. And he said, "I don't want to tell you any more than that because I don't want to incriminate you. But," and he says, "maybe 20, 30 years down the road when we're on a beach somewhere or something, I'll fill you in on everything."
When did he tell you that?
He told me this the night he was flying out. And that's the next morning it was ruled a homicide, and he was already on a plane.
What went through my mind at that point when I heard her say that was that Matthew knows more about what happened that night.
And then we had this little piece from Matt saying that he met a lot of sketchy people in the couple days he was home. So that kind of threw us into another investigative cycle of who are the sketchy people Matt met when he was home? Like, who are these people?
So as a result of her providing this information, we then did a search warrant at her house, and we retrieved a backpack that contained a laptop computer and David Knight's passport. But we also retrieved a box of paperwork, and in those documents was the closing date of S.A. Casey, and that's the company that Matthew and David had purchased in the Tampa area for $975,000 and had put down a $30,000 deposit. It also showed that the balance owing was also due on that date of September the 25th.
10 days after Carmela was murdered.
What we learned from Graham MacDonald when the investigators interviewed him was that Matthew Knight is his best friend.
I worked with him for many years. He was a carpenter, I was a production assistant.
They worked together at a company in Toronto, and they also did construction together after that, but that's where they initially had met and become friends. He told the investigators that he was with David Knight that day, the day of the fire.
He dropped me off in Toronto.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he took me to Toronto. That was about it.
On Monday he did?
Yeah.
David had picked him up that day, and that they went to Toronto together, and that David had dropped him off in order for Graham to get his passport signed. He also told the investigators that from there he went to his grandmother's house, but his grandmother wasn't home, so then he went to a friend's place.
Left there around 7:30. Went to my grandmother's, seen if she was home yet. Never got no answer. Jumped on the train and went back.
What was odd about his statement was the fact that he indicated he was with David the day of the murder, but yet David Knight never mentioned being with anybody that day. He never mentioned going to Toronto. He never mentioned picking anybody up. He never mentioned being with anybody. It also was significant because we knew that Matthew had driven Graham out to his mother's house, because that was revealed in Heather's interview.
They'd actually seen it for themselves. That was the day they had watched the man in the white Kia pick someone up at Moody's Motel and drive away. But Matt was now in Florida.
So we sent two investigators down to Florida. They attempted to talk to Matt. They left cards at the business.
And at no time were they able to speak to him other than on the telephone. He said that he was never planning on returning back to Ontario. Heather is lying, and that all of the things that she said was not true, and that he had no interest in speaking to the police. So while the investigators were there, they used that as an opportunity to speak to David Knight's mistress. And she gave a statement saying that she knew that he was setting up a company in the Tampa area, but she didn't know exactly what the company was, but that they were boyfriend and girlfriend, and that he was from Ontario, had 2 boys, and that he had been divorced for 6 years. Once the investigators returned from Florida, we then went back to Graham and had another interview to question him further.
I don't think so. I don't know. I don't think so, though. See, my memory's
He told the investigators that he had gone to a friend's house and that they were doing drugs, and that his memory scattered and he has no further recollection of what happened that particular day. He also admitted that Matt had driven him out to his mother's house, that he didn't take the public transit like he had said in his initial interview. And then when the investigator told him that Matt and David have no intention of taking him with them to Florida, he became very upset and he wanted to end the interview. Well, at this point, we weren't sure of anybody's involvement. I think it would be fair to say that David Knight's alibi was solid. We did not know Graham McDonald's involvement, if any. All we knew at this point was that the story wasn't adding up.
Around this time, Carmela's toxicology results came back. Although there were traces of cocaine found in the syringe and a small quantity found in her purse, there was no cocaine or any other drug found in her system.
We're also getting banking records, we're getting production orders for cell phones, we're getting production orders for the cell towers, and we're just rummaging through all this surveillance video.
It was incredible. All the places he said that he went that he didn't go, we seized that too and had to go through that. So the hardware store where he said he went, he never went there. So we had to watch that full day. Never went there. So he gave us bits that were lies. I don't know if it was on purpose or I'm not sure.
They also learned he applied for a new passport and attempted to cross the border by car. He was denied entry.
He told the Border Services that he knows he's being turned back because of the death of his wife. And he was just wanting to go to Florida and just do some fishing and just unwind and relax. They also were able to locate 2 phones in his car, phone numbers that we weren't aware of.
Dave was continually switching phones, pretty much weekly on us, getting new numbers. And at that time, we had a tracker on Dave's car for our surveillance purposes, and Dave went to search for the tracker and it was gone. So that's why we didn't know Dave was at the border. That's how careful he was, right? Everything he did. He knew that from day one, we were looking at him. He was at a hockey arena. You're not anywhere near the house, so why would you be worried about the police? Approximately like a month later, we were sitting in our office. We had a big team room. Mel, who was one of our officers that was working on the video, says, I think you should come and see this. I think it's kind of important.
Mel, what do we have here?
I noticed that this vehicle here, it matched the description, and then the license plate was his license plate.
Filling up 2 gas cans at the Husky.
So he finishes filling up this one, and then he goes into the trunk to fill up the second one.
When he gave us that outline of his day, he told us he went to the Husky to clean his car. But he forgot to mention that he filled up 2 gas cans.
We're lucky we got this video then.
The fact that David Knight was not wanting to participate in the investigation, that he was switching up cell phones, and the fact that he had obtained a new passport, knowing that we had his original passport, attempting to cross the border, purchasing gasoline at the Husky gas bar on the day of the fire and murder. He cannot be eliminated from this investigation. Now he's classified as a suspect.
Next week on Crime Beat, police go to elaborate lengths trying to break David's alibi. I'm Anthony Robart. Thank you for joining us tonight on Crime Beat. Want more episodes of Crime Beat? Listen to the Crime Beat podcast now for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcast. And for past episodes of Crime Beat, go to the Global TV app, visit globaltv.com, or check out our Crime Beat YouTube page.